In week 1 of the Tupac Shakur murder trial, the prosecution's own evidence named 2 different shooters. Denvonta Lee testified that DeAndre Smith fired the fatal shots. A 2008 recording attributed to the defendant, Duane Davis, said Smith refused the weapon and Orlando Anderson fired instead. Both men are now dead. Neither can be cross-examined. Davis has pleaded not guilty and is not alleged to have pulled the trigger. The jury has 2 incompatible accounts and no living witness to resolve either one. The state's case against Duane Davis, known as Kefi D, consists of 1 count of first-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon and a gang enhancement. At his arraignment, Davis entered a plea of not guilty, and he is presumed innocent. The prosecution does not allege that Davis fired the weapon himself. Instead, they allege he planned the attack and supplied the weapon. During opening statements, the prosecutor stated, "Let's be clear, Duane Davis did not pull the trigger." And here's what makes this uncomfortable. The prosecution argued that the shooting on September 7, 1996 was a direct act of retaliation. According to their opening statement, after Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson, was beaten at the MGM Grand following the Mike Tyson fight, Davis organized a response targeting Tupac Shakur. The defense countered during their opening remarks that Davis exaggerated and invented his later accounts. On Monday, the state called former Las Vegas police officer Gary Dale. Dale testified that he stopped the black BMW carrying Shakur and Suge Knight because the vehicle had no visible license plate. Dale later rode in the ambulance with Shakur. When Dale asked who shot him, Shakur responded, "We'll take care of it ourselves." Ingrid Stokes testified that she was in a convertible near the Flamingo and Caval intersection and had spoken with Knight shortly before the gunfire. After fleeing the scene, she nearly collided with a white 4-door car, but Stokes testified she could not identify the occupants or determine where the shots came from. Former homicide investigator Brent Becker testified that multiple witnesses described a white Cadillac containing 2 to 4 occupants, and that ballistics analysis pointed toward a .40 caliber Glock. Becker added that no recovered cartridge case matched the impact pattern on the BMW, and that Knight's initial interview with police appeared rehearsed. 29 years in, the very first day of testimony established that no witness ever identified who fired. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. On Tuesday, forensic pathologist Dr. Lisa Gavin, who reviewed the original autopsy records, testified that Tupac Shakur sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen, and the manner of death was ruled a homicide. Previously unpublished autopsy images were shown in court, prompting members of Shakur's family to leave the courtroom. Gavin's evidence establishes the cause and manner of death, but does not identify the shooter or establish Davis's role. To show the events preceding the shooting, MGM investigator Michael Ingram authenticated surveillance footage of the lobby altercation, though he testified that its poor quality prevented him from identifying almost anyone. Former officer Kenneth Riles testified that he encountered Orlando Anderson immediately after the altercation. According to Riles, Anderson stated he was attacked by unknown men, declined medical help and to press charges, and was allowed to leave. Former Las Vegas investigator Dean Oakley testified to recovering shell casings and placing traffic cones to preserve the scene, describing the police search for a light-colored or white Cadillac carrying 4 men. While the scene recovery and vehicle search document investigative work, they do not identify who fired. And here is what makes this uncomfortable. In 2025, the defense introduced an alternative theory suggesting that death row's former head of security, Reggie Wright Jr., or another party organized the shooting. On Tuesday, the state called James McDonald, a former death row associate known as Mob James. McDonald rejected this theory under oath, testifying that Shakur was too valuable to death row to be killed by its own security chief. McDonald declined to answer many questions and expressed reluctance to assist the prosecution, stating, "I don't want to send you to prison." Wright himself testified on Tuesday, stating he was at Club 662 during the shooting. He described later arranging around-the-clock protection for Shakur's hospital room, receiving Shakur's ashes, and passing them to his family. When asked if he had any involvement in the murder, Wright replied, "Absolutely not." While both men rejected the defense's theory, their testimony does not independently resolve the state's allegations, turning Wednesday's focus to the historical investigation. On Wednesday, former FBI agent Wade Lee, who interviewed Davis in the late 1990s, testified he could not place Davis in Las Vegas on the night of the shooting. Under cross-examination, Lee stated he had no evidence Davis ordered the attack, though this absence did not prove Davis was elsewhere. Former LAPD investigator Darren Dupree testified regarding a 2008 conversation in which Davis said his group searched for Shakur and Knight after the MGM altercation. Dupree stated Davis claimed he had the gun and passed it to the back seat, and that the alleged payment remained an unsubstantiated claim, not an investigative finding. In 2009, investigators attempted to verify the payment claim by using Davis as a confidential informant, sending him to New York to contact a suspected buyer. Investigative records show the operation produced no corroborating evidence, and the alleged payment arrangement remained entirely unsubstantiated. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. In his late 1990s interviews with law enforcement, Davis stated under questioning that he did not know who shot Shakur, and he suggested alternative suspects. In 2008, his recorded account changed, describing the white Cadillac passing the .40 caliber Glock to the back seat and implicating his nephew, Orlando Anderson. These documented shifts over the years present an issue of credibility for both the prosecution and the defense, leaving the historical record of his accounts unresolved without proving which version is the truth. On Thursday, the state called Denvonta Lee, a former member of the Compton crew, who personally knew both Duane Davis and Orlando Anderson. Lee's testimony provided the first direct naming of a shooter in the trial's chronology. He testified under compulsion, appearing in the courtroom only because a court order forced his attendance. In his sworn account, Lee identified DeAndre Smith as the gunman. Lee testified that because Anderson did not have a clear angle from his seat, he passed the handgun to Smith, who fired. This identification remains a sworn assertion rather than an independently established physical finding, and here's what makes this uncomfortable. The jury listened to the full 2008 recorded police interview, an audio recording that runs roughly 5 hours. In this account, Duane Davis described an entirely different sequence of events inside the white Cadillac. According to Davis on the tape, he passed the .40 caliber Glock to the back seat, but DeAndre Smith did not want the weapon. Davis stated that Orlando Anderson then took the handgun and opened fire. When Detective Greg Kading asked if Anderson had to lean over Smith to shoot, Davis replied, "He did, yeah." Davis also stated on the recording, "If the other car had been on my side, I would have fired myself." This audio recording serves as evidence of what Davis claimed occurred, rather than independent physical proof that Anderson fired. Duane Davis has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent. While prosecutors do not allege he fired the weapon, but rather that he planned the attack and supplied it, this recorded statement directly conflicts with Thursday's other evidence. The two men Davis named as being involved in the exchange of the weapon are both deceased. DeAndre Smith died in 2004, and Orlando Anderson was killed in 1998. Because both men are dead, they are unavailable to testify or face cross-examination in court. This leaves the two competing accounts completely untestable through the direct evidence of either man's own testimony. The consequence of Thursday's proceedings is that the state's own presentation of evidence has placed two contradictory accounts before the jury, with Denvonta Lee's sworn testimony and Davis's 2008 recording naming two different men as the sole shooter. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. With no surviving eyewitness from inside the Cadillac available to resolve this contradiction under oath, the trial record must rely on the recovery of physical evidence. Retired Detective Clifford Mogg testified that the murder weapon was never recovered. The white Cadillac itself has also never been found. According to Mogg's testimony, investigators never identified who rented the Cadillac and never established where the vehicle originated. These physical and logistical absences limit independent corroboration, leaving no recovered weapon or confirmed vehicle trail tying the alleged participants to the shooting. These missing links affect what the official record can independently establish without treating their absence as proof of any person's guilt or innocence. Instead, they present a distinct set of logistical gaps that the jury must weigh against the spoken accounts. During opening statements, the defense presented Davis's explanation for his changing accounts and the 2008 recording, which remains a defense assertion rather than a factual finding. According to his defense team, Davis lied during the 2008 interview to gain leverage with law enforcement while facing federal drug charges that carried a potential life sentence. His attorneys also asserted that he later exaggerated his public accounts and memoir for money rather than to tell the truth. The task for the jury is to evaluate these shifting statements by assessing credibility, consistency, and corroboration to determine if the evidence supports the charged theory beyond a reasonable doubt. Duane Keith Davis has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent. Prosecutors do not allege that Davis pulled the trigger himself, but rather that he planned the retaliatory attack and supplied the weapon. Contradictions in witness accounts and missing physical items, including the unrecovered Glock and the white Cadillac, may affect the reliability and strength of the prosecution's case. However, these gaps do not by themselves prove Davis innocent, establish another person's guilt, or determine the final verdict. The first week appears to be a search for the person who fired. Its clearest result is narrower. The courtroom has mapped the limits of what surviving testimony and missing evidence can prove. After hearing the testimony rather than the headlines, what do you believe the record establishes, and what does it still leave unanswered? Duane Keith Davis has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent. Prosecutors do not allege he fired the weapon, but allege he planned the attack and supplied it. Today, with no weapon and no vehicle, only conflicting words remain to decide his fate. What do you believe this courtroom record establishes?